You've probably heard survival garden advice that says you need acres of food, shelves full of canned goods, and a plan for every possible disaster. And if you do those things, that's amazing. But if you've tried following those rules, you may have felt overwhelmed or like you were failing before you even started. And I get it because that was me. I lived on 3.5 acres and I grew a massive garden. And I tried to grow everything basically for storage, but no matter how much I harvested or how many jars I canned, it never quite felt like enough. And I think part of it was fear-driven media and the perfect homesteads that I would see on social media. It just kind of put me in fight or flight mode instead of building the resilience that I really needed. I just want to pause really quick and thank everyone who joined the conversation over on my recent canning video. The comments were incredible, and so many of you guys shared real experiences with things like prepping, blackouts, and food preservation that actually worked for you. And the one theme that really stood out to me is that it's best to not put all of our eggs in one basket. I actually think that wisdom applies to almost everything in life, including how we design our gardens. And if you would really like to get started with that, I have a free training that walks you through the first steps to grow a small, productive garden that fits your space, your season, and your lifestyle, and I linked it below for you. My new garden here is built for flexibility and versatility. It's got raised beds that can be moved and grow bags that I can move around with the seasons. Here's a little bit about my garden and me, especially if you're new here. I've gardened in 2 very different climates, including Michigan and South Carolina, and in spaces from a tiny container garden on a deck to a mix of 28 raised beds, plus in-ground gardens across 3.5 acres. My current garden isn't tiny, but it's small and productive, and in my videos, I film up close because I have neighbors that are right over here with their cars in the driveway, and my kids are often running around me. And then on one side, I've got neighbors and cars, and then my driveway is right over here with my car. Our house is right behind me, and then on the other side of that, it's a really busy street. So I don't show the whole space at once for privacy reasons. And someday I'd love a fence so that I can pan out on my videos, but for now, that's why I film pretty close up. My channel isn't about prepping, although I have so much respect for people who find peace of mind in that lifestyle. It's not for me right now in my season of life. My garden doesn't feed us 100%, and it doesn't cover every emergency scenario, but it does give us fresh, seasonal food all year long, a little extra for storage, and peace of mind. And sometimes that can be as simple as 1 2-foot by 4-foot raised bed of herbs. The truth is, there's no one-size-fits-all survival garden, and what works for one family might not work for another family. In this video, I'd like to share what I learned after downsizing from a huge garden to a space that I can actually manage. I'm going to break down common survival garden rules that can burn you out and give practical steps to build resilience, maximize your space, and enjoy gardening again without the pressure. So a garden doesn't have to be huge to make a difference, and even a small plot can provide fresh food, a few high-value crops that you can store, and most importantly, I think, is the confidence that your garden is going to survive life's curveballs. One of the easiest ways to build that kind of security, I think, is to think in terms of seasons. As we head further into fall in my area, I'm going to be using simple tools like an unheated greenhouse and frost blankets that are going to allow me to stretch my harvest at least a couple months. Right now I'm growing carrots, beets, radishes, broccoli, potatoes, and herbs, many of which are perennials. I have green onions growing and another round of cucumbers if I'm lucky before the first frost hits. Plus I have Brussels sprouts growing and cabbage, which is eventually going to be underneath my unheated greenhouse. I'll be putting my garlic in next month. Even in northern South Carolina where we are, shorter daylight in the fall is going to slow growth regardless of the weather. So every year I try to plant my long crops in August to give them time to mature before the days really start shortening. If you're in a northern zone and you missed fall planting, there is no pressure. Just use this time to plan ahead for spring and consider season extenders. Focus on crops that store well like carrots, beets, onions, winter squash, and then quick ones like kale, spinach, and cut and come again lettuce. And then ones that have dual purpose like beets and carrots, or perennials like blueberries and asparagus, for example. Pick one crop to focus on this season, like start small with a quick growing one, considering what you can manage right now or first thing in the spring. Add a season extender like a frost blanket, a low tunnel, or a small portable unheated greenhouse to help stretch your harvest, because even a few weeks make a big difference. Map your garden out for growth cycles and really identify the short, the medium, and long-term crops so that you can maximize yield without overcrowding. And I want you to know that my garden is absolutely not perfect. I talk about never leaving the soil bare, but I've got bare patches right now. I talk about succession planting, but mine isn't always perfectly timed. And even after 22 years of gardening experience in several different gardens, most of the bulk soil that I purchase from local businesses that I trust, including the current batch that I have right now, needs a lot of extra building before it actually thrives. And that's just part of the process. Your garden, like mine, is always a work in progress. Another common rule that you may have heard about is that if you want to be self-sufficient, you have to grow staples like potatoes, corn, or wheat, for example. And while those crops absolutely do have value, they might not be the smartest choice for your life, your space, or your climate. For years, I really focused on them, and I focused on them so much that I overinvested time and space, and then I ended up with a garden that I felt like lacked balance. And if a crop demands a ton of space, time, and storage effort in your situation, it might not give you the biggest return that you're working towards. So instead, we can really think about survival food differently and focus on high-value, nutrient-dense crops that work in your specific climate and setup. And again, that might look like greens that you can harvest again and again, root crops that store well, perennials that are going to feed you for years, or the multi-purpose ones that can kind of pull double or triple duty in your kitchen. I go into this much more in detail in my free training and then in my full course, where I walk you through it step by step in the lessons and inside our community. But here are 3 actionable steps that you can start with right now. Pick one high-value cut-and-come-again crop, like a nutrient-dense variety that thrives in your zone and regrows after multiple harvests, like kale, spinach, or lettuce mixes. Add a dual-purpose crop or a perennial. Dual-purpose ones would be like beets, because there are their roots that you can eat, and there are greens, which are delicious and nutritious, and then there are carrots. You can use their tops to make lots of pesto that you can freeze. And then perennials would be like blueberries or rhubarb. And there are so many different varieties of blueberries that you're bound to find one that's native to your area, which will thrive. And a lot of those can be grown in containers. Really think about nutrition and ask yourself, which additional foods could I add that will give me the most nutrition, flexibility, and staying power in my actual meals? When you shift from staple crops only to high value crops that fit your life, your garden suddenly becomes way more sustainable and more enjoyable. And I think the enjoyable part is so important. Another survival garden rule that can add pressure is the idea that your garden should cover every possible scenario, like blackouts, supply shortages, or natural disasters. I fell into this mindset when I was trying to preserve everything and grow every single staple, and all I did was create stress for myself. The reality is nobody can prepare for every possible situation, and trying to do that could leave you burned out and use up energy that you could be using elsewhere to be more productive in your garden. When I shared my canning video, the comments made something really clear, and that's that most of you agreed that it's not smart to put all of your eggs in one basket. And some of you rely on canning, others freezing, fermenting, dehydrating, or mixing and matching depending on what's available and your situation. And that flexibility is what actually really works in real life. And the same principle applies in the garden. Resistance in seasonal eating comes from diversity and flexibility, not from being 100% disaster proof. Here are 3 simple ways to build a flexible, resilient garden. Stagger your harvest by planting a couple crops with different maturity dates so that you always have something ready to eat. Like quick greens, the roots that take a medium amount of time, and long-term storage crops are ideas to help you eat more seasonally. Create movable zones in your space, which I absolutely love. It's been a game changer in my garden. Use containers, grow bags, or movable raised beds so that you can adjust your garden layout as your space or your sunlight or even your life changes. You can layer your benefits, like include herbs and multifunctional plants that are going to do more than one job, like culinary herbs that you can harvest fresh and dry for later, and pollinator-friendly medicinal native flowers that are going to attract beneficial insects and increase the biodiversity in your garden, or companion plants that improve soil and deter pests. Another survival garden kind of myth is that your garden has to run like clockwork. Perfectly timed succession planting with no gaps and no mistakes. And I'll be really honest, I do teach these principles, but I'm passionate about the part that it's never going to be perfect, and striving for perfection is not sustainable. My garden is still not perfectly timed. Right now, I've got bare patches that I haven't replanted yet, and sometimes my succession crops don't line up the way I planned. My garden is not my full-time job. So let me reiterate, perfection isn't required. What matters most is building a system that works with your growing zone and your microclimate, not against it. And that might mean planting cool season crops earlier if you have short summers, or tucking frost-hardy greens under a low tunnel to help them keep going longer. It also means giving yourself grace when things don't go exactly as planned. Gardens are living systems, they're not factories. And one of the best ways to handle imperfection is to plan with flexibility in mind. You can cover bare soil with mulch or cover crops to protect it until you're ready to plant again. And again, we can choose crops that make the most out of the space that you do plant. These strategies can keep your garden productive and you eating as seasonally as possible without requiring you to micromanage every single planting date. Here are 3 clear steps that you can take today. Work with your season, learn your frost dates and your daylight patterns, and plant accordingly. Your garden rhythm should match your microclimate and not really a rigid schedule. Over time, you can definitely adjust. Check for bare soil, and if you miss a succession planting, don't stress out. Just use mulch or even leave some weeds, because they're better than nothing as long as they don't completely take over your space. Plant for flexibility. Every crop you choose could give you multiple uses, so that even if your timing isn't perfect, you're still going to be getting value. Seed saving and seed starting is a whole other video topic, but I'm just going to simplify it really quick. There is a lot of pride in starting every single plant from seed, and yes, it can be rewarding and economical, but here's the truth. Starting everything from seed isn't always realistic, especially if you're short on time, space, or just starting out. After years of seed starting, I've learned that there can be burnout, failed seedlings, and wasted time that could have been spent actually growing food. I personally save a lot of my seeds, and I do start many of the things I grow, but I've also learned that if life happens and I can't do it all, there is no shame. The reality is that buying high quality transplants, if it fits into your budget, can save you stress and still give you a return on your investment and plenty of harvest. You're not less of a gardener for taking shortcuts. You're being smart about your resources. In fact, some of the most successful, productive gardeners I know use a mix of starts and direct sown crops. And if you buy open pollinated varieties, you can save the seeds from those crops and then stretch your return on investment. Check out your farmer's market, because you can probably find starts for sale at some point, or even Facebook Marketplace. Here are a few actionable ways to simplify seed starting. Buy starts for tricky crops like tomatoes, peppers, and brassicas like broccoli and cabbage. They're worth buying as transplants if seed starting feels overwhelming to you. Direct sow the easy ones like beans, peas, carrots, beets, and actually most greens do best direct sown straight into the soil. So I'd recommend experimenting when you're ready. Pick one crop each season to try from seed indoors, and that way you're going to build your skills without overwhelming yourself. At the end of the day, gardening isn't about following every so-called rule. It's about finding what actually works for you, your space, your lifestyle, and your climate. And for me, that meant downsizing into a small space garden that still gives us fresh food year-round without the pressure to do all of it. Whether that means choosing high-value crops over endless rows of potatoes, or buying transplants instead of starting every seed, or letting go of the pressure to be perfect, the goal is the same: to grow real food that nourishes your family without burning you out. And here's the truth: we never stop learning as gardeners. Even after growing up around it and then a couple decades of learning, I am still adjusting, experimenting, and shifting how I do things. And that's part of the joy. So now I'd love to hear from you. What's one gardening rule you used to believe but have since broken, and why? Share your story in the comments below so that we can all keep learning from each other. If you want more support in making your small space work smarter for you, don't forget to check out my free training that I linked below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.